Around 1 year ago, I quit my high-paying consulting job to basically build startups myself. And recently, I've also joined a startup full-time as their head of growth. And in this last year, I've been learning a lot about, building businesses, building startups. And I've been seeing so many parallels between a startup that's well built and a life that's well lived. And there are so many business lessons that I've started applying to my own life that has helped me live a better life. And looking back, when I was younger, the problem was that I sort of let life happen to me. And there are these abstract principles, abstract, advice that you read from like personal development books, self-improvement books that sounds really cool, but in reality is really hard to apply into your life. Business books are usually a lot more practical, a lot more tangible, and a lot more actionable. And I think that's where a lot of self-improvement / self-help type of content falls short. There's no systematic way of improving. You repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And basically you're just vibing and following your intuition and the general principles that you learned along the way. And the solution to that is to actually start running your life like a business, like a startup, with that level of intensity and that level of systematic thinking. There are 6 major ways in which I run my life like a startup. I've broken them down into short-term, medium-term, and long-term frameworks. So think of it this way. Short-term are the things that you can immediately start doing today or within this week. Medium-term are more like weekly or monthly stuff. And long-term frameworks are more stuff that can be applied annually or even like for the rest of your life. So let's start with short-term frameworks. The first and one of the most interesting one I want to share is hypothesis thinking. Around a month ago, I started my new role as the head of growth of a startup. And as part of the role, I have to, start a lot of these different initiatives, different projects to try basically grow our startup. And initially, what I was going to do was just think of an initiative and then just say, hey, let's try this out. But then what my boss basically told me is that instead, he wants me to think of it in terms of hypothesis. What is his hypothesis in terms of what are you planning to do? What do you expect the result to be? And why do you think that action will lead to that result? Write that down and then go forward with the experiment and then come back to see if what you thought was actually what happened. And that got me thinking, I can actually apply this into my own life as well, because a lot of the times we have so many things that we kind of just started doing because you read about it in a book, you saw some other friends doing it, but you're not really clearly saying exactly why you think what might happen and for what reason. And a lot of the times you're actually subconsciously doing it anyway, but what you actually want to do is to put it down in a piece of paper or write it out in an Excel spreadsheet. This is important because whatever you start, whatever like project, initiative, side hustle, whatever, or even like career choice you make, you can always look back into your hypothesis and actually tell yourself what went right and what went wrong. Without this in place, you're just vibing through your life. Now the format of how I do this is usually if, then, because. For example, if I post daily on Instagram, then after 2 months, I will see a 50% increase in my follower count because that is what influencer A, B, and C said. And now that I've had that written down, I can come back in 2 months and see whether that was actually true. And in general, hypothesis thinking has made me much more clear in terms of my priorities, in terms of things I'm testing, and things I want to test in the future. Secondly, is this concept called minimal viable product, or the MVP. In a startup, when you're trying something new, instead of building something that's perfect, 10 out of 10, and then send it to the customer to try out, you actually want to build a minimum viable product. What it means is a product that is just good enough they can get into the hands of a customer to try it out, to get feedback, and then improve your product along the way. And 99% of people don't do this in their own life. They have a certain idea of what might happen. For example, they think that they want to become a lawyer or a doctor, and without testing it, they immediately dived into law school or med school, which might cost them 5 or 6 years. That's the equivalent of building a product in your basement, spending years on it, making sure it's perfect, and then going out and realizing that no one actually likes it. Lots of these law students, math students, they spent years on their degrees and then they left school, they start actually working in the profession and they realize they don't like it. What you want to do instead is to build your MVP. What is the smallest scale of experiment that you can do to test out whether you actually like something? Now you can apply this to everything, right? But let's go back to the law and doctor example. There's this famous entrepreneur called Sean Burry who's built multiple very successful $1 million businesses. And he said initially he actually wanted to become a doctor. But what he did was that he shadowed a doctor for 2 weeks. And he said literally on the first day, he already realized that he doesn't want to become a doctor. And just by testing it out, spending like 2 weeks, and in this case, he realized it within like the first 2 days. Just by doing that simple experiment, he's able to save himself years of med school, which, if you think about it, is such a high opportunity cost. So the next time when you're thinking of, committing to something, try to think if there's a minimum viable way of testing it out before fully committing to it. But even with the MVP framework, a lot of the times people still struggle a lot because they're really slow in terms of deciding what they want to try out and what they want to do, which is where principle 3 or lesson number 3 comes into play. Keeping in mind these are all short-term frameworks. Now let's go through the third framework, which is move fast and break things. This is actually Facebook's motto, I think, when they first started, or Google's, I can't remember. I think it's Facebook. They had it on their wall. If I can find it, I'll pop it up here. Startups don't have forever, right? They usually have a certain amount of runway, which is basically money they have in the bank. And in order to survive before the money runs out, they have to test a lot of stuff, find what's working, and then double down on that. That's why you have to move fast, and a lot of the times break things because something might not work and you have to try something else. And that's the same with our lives, right? We think we have forever, but we really don't. So an antidote to that, to beat this problem, is to move fast and break things. Try a bunch of stuff, try it really quickly, break a bunch of stuff, realize that you don't really like a lot of the stuff that you tried. But then in that process, because you're moving so quickly, you're like getting the shit out of the pipes so clean water can flow in. You're getting the reps in to realize what you actually like. And then you can basically figure out what is that one thing that you want to double down on. So move fast and break things. Now, all these short-term frameworks are cool, but here are 2 more medium-term frameworks that you can look into. In a startup, like I said, you have limited resources. You have limited money. You don't have like tons of money that you can just, throw at different places. And the same as with your life, but instead of just money, it is also time, right? How are you allocating your resources? In a startup, sometimes they might spend more into, say, product development, but that means their marketing will take a hit. And that's the same in your life too. You want to figure out where you want to put more of your resources when. Now, if you're someone in your early 20s, you want to grow your career, you might choose to work in a job that's a lot more demanding, maybe like a 9 to 9, like I used to when I was in consulting, or worse, like you want to be a lawyer or an investment banker and you work like 9 to 12. That's okay. That's where you decided to allocate your resources. But that also means that you're intentionally making a choice to put less resources in your relationship, in your fitness, or other aspect of your life. A lot of people just let it kind of happen to them. They let whatever comes up to them consume their time. But what you really want to do is to be intentional about how you're allocating your resources. But then how you allocate resources aren't going to stay the same forever, which is where this next principle comes into play. Review cycle. In a startup, in a business, people like to talk in quarters, right? Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and you basically want to do the same with your life. I know this sounds like super boring, but it really works. It works for a reason, because think about it. All these businesses, they are here to maximize their profit. So they want to do things right. And you are here to maximize your life. So you want to do your life right as well. How I do it, very simple. I have an annual, quarterly, monthly, and a weekly planning session. And these doesn't have to be like super complex. Every week, I spend like 5 to 10 minutes on a Sunday to review how my week has gone. What are the highlights? What did I do well? What did I not do well? What can I improve on? And then every month, I also have the same process, but just for my month. And then every quarter, I'll reset my goals, because instead of doing annual goals, you should be doing quarterly goals. You can check out the book 12-Week Years if you want more details on that. But basically, every quarter, I see it as a new year where I set new goals, or at least I update. And then on top of everything, I also have an annual review, which at the end of the year, I'll review like what are my highlights for the year, what are some cool places I've been to, what's the coolest achievement I had, what are something that did not work too well, what are something that I failed. And also, of course, to plan ahead. What do I want to achieve this year? What's my priorities? Where do I want to allocate my resources? And that flows into my resource allocation / priorities in life framework. Now, with these short-term and medium frameworks alone, you should already be ahead of like at least half of the people that you know around you, because most people don't do these stuff, right? They're just super passive with their life. They're reactive. Whatever comes to them, they deal with it, and then they move on. And they just do that with their whole life. When all this time, what you should be doing is to be more intentional and more direct about where your life wants to go, and then just run it like a business. But here are a few more long-term business frameworks that you can apply to your life that I've personally found super beneficial. The first one is on investment. Now, Amazon was famous for reinvesting all its profits back into the company. And for a long time, they were criticized for it because they weren't profit-making and their stock price suffered for it. But they were just year in year reinvesting more and more of their profits back into the company. so they weren't like taking money out or anything. And essentially, you want to do something similar with your life, especially if you're someone that's in your early mid-20s like I am. There really isn't a big benefit for you to be taking your current profit and just spending it elsewhere. Now, don't just mean money, but also mean time. For example, if you spend 2 years working in an investment bank, 9 to 12, and then you're able to quit that job to do like a 9 to 5 in like a more chill setting. Now you've freed up like 5 to 6 hours a day. Now you have two choices. A, you can go spend that profit by, just chilling, watching Netflix at home with those extra time, or you can reinvest it into your life. You can spend those 5-6 hours building a side business. And what I'm saying here is that you should be thinking about reinvesting. How do you reinvest all the time and money you have back into your own growth? And it's the same when we talk about money, right? Maybe you got promoted, so you get more extra income. Yes, you can spend that extra income in buying nicer clothes, or you can spend that income into buying a few more books, which can then help you make more money down the line. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't enjoy your life. You should. I mean, I live in a nice flat. I pay for it and I go to nice holidays here and there. But just be mindful that you're not spending all your profit, that you're not growing as a person. And that's basically leads me to my next long-term framework, which is scaling versus growing healthily. So in the startup space, there are basically two schools of thoughts. There are the growth at all costs. You want to become like $1 billion company. You want to scale. You want to, get the whole world using you. Or there's the, cash flow lifestyle business route where maybe you don't even have an investor. You're kind of just a healthy business that's making money and you are growing bit by bit every year, but you're not pouring everything back into growth at all costs. Your life should be the same, right? Yes, you want to think about reinvesting into your life, but you also want to decide whether you want to be a hyper-growth startup or you just want to be like a cash flow, lifestyle, profitable business. A lot of high achievers will automatically fall into the growth at all costs camp where they just reinvest everything, every bit of their life back into just like growing at all costs and then not really enjoying their life. But actually you want to realize there's this other path in life where you can grow healthily, maybe a bit slower in life. And as a person, just like as a startup, you want to make that decision. Do you want to be someone that is prioritizing growth at all costs or someone that's, growing healthily, just you're happy with like less growth, but you're more chill in the meantime. And the final bit, this is not really about short, medium, or long term, but this is just about systemizing things. In a startup, in a business, there are a lot of standardized ways of doing things. There are a lot of systems in place. And what I'm suggesting is that you actually want some of those in your life too. Of course, you don't want too much rigidity in your life where it becomes almost like a routine day after day. But a lot of the times, these systems can actually help you live a better life. For example, I put all my good friends' birthday on my Google Calendar and I set it on as an annual repeat event. So whenever I'm using my Google Calendar, which is every single day, I can see immediately like, oh, it's who and whose birthday next week, is who and whose birthday, in 3 weeks. So maybe I'll think about like, writing them a card or saying happy birthday a day earlier. I have calendar invite for my hangouts. So for example, if I'm hanging out with my other friends, sometimes he'll send me a Google Calendar invite. So I have it on my calendar so I'll make sure I won't forget. And yes, you can like just try to remember these things on top of your head, but it's so much easier when you put it down on paper and you systemize the process. Now you can do this in terms of your calendar, but also in terms of how you design your life in general. For me, every Sunday is girlfriend time. I spend time with my girlfriend. We've kind of made that into a system where it's always Sunday. Now, yes, we can sort of just be more impromptu where we just hang out whenever we want to. But skip that, we put that down on paper and then we have a mutual agreement that Sunday is, hangout time. And we always hang out on Sundays. That frees me up from the mental stress of thinking of like, oh, when do I need to hang out with my girlfriend? Can I hang out with my other friends on like, say, Saturday or Friday? Now that I'm hanging out with my girlfriend on Sunday, I can, safely hang out or do other stuff on, say, a Friday or a Saturday. That's all I have for you. I think these are all quite actionable. And yeah, run your life like a startup, follow for more, and I'll see you next time. Peace.